Welcome to another video. Well, we're going to talk about gang stalking. We're going to talk about the different things targets deal with, the psychological asymmetrical warfare that targets are subjected to, all these little techniques, right? And the fact that it can last for a long time is very demoralizing, and it shocked me, okay? I remember that I thought this stuff is going to stop, okay? These people, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what their problem is. It's obviously a coordinated effort, but just like most of the things that you experience in your life up to that point, has a beginning and an ending. But gang stalking, it just keeps dragging on, man. It goes and goes and goes. And I thought, well, 2 years, 5 years, and I got to 10 years. And then when I got past that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this is ever going to stop. I got up to 15 years. At that point, the finish line is pretty much gone. Okay. And I basically resolved to deal with this stuff indefinitely if I have to, because I really don't have a choice, But the danger of dealing with harassment for that long is that you're gonna be dealing with the possibility of a psychosis. I've talked about derealization before, because the gang stalking experience is a complete it's a complete 100% reality flip. Okay, and I mentioned that in other videos. We talk about the awakening, right? And some of the positive aspects of being a target individual, in the sense that you're awakened to this reality around you, the evil that is in the world, the realistic limitations that you have as a human being, getting rid of all the facades in your life, all the BS, and you see everybody else in a light that is, well, more accurate. The world is illuminated, okay? But in that process, there is a danger of slipping in to a psychosis, okay, with the isolation, trauma, and all that stuff. Targets deal with intense forms of harassment, whether it's, the covert drugging or, the covert poisoning, the sleep deprivation. All these things can come together in a toxic soup. And of course, with the different stimuli that targets deal with, they could actually go into a psychosis fairly quick. But once you've been dealing with this for years, decades, well, you start wondering, is this even real? Is it even possible, right? Because, the world that you grew up in, things like gang stalking don't exist. No, that's crazy. That's crazy talk, right? That defies all the psychological parameters and norms that you grew up, dealing with. And most of the people out there are not subjected to this. I've talked about that. This would not work if there was a large percentage of the population subjected to harassment, okay? It just would not work. This relies upon a very small targeted percentage of the population to be subjected to this crazy stuff. It has to be obfuscated. It has to be hidden. And a lot of the people that get drawn into your scenario are being drawn in through that dynamic, okay? Because there's people that know, okay? They know they're harassing you. They know what's going on. But when you become dysfunctional, or when the target becomes dysfunctional, when they start to react, or they start to feel the effects of gang stalking, then other people get drawn in. And of course, if they say anything, then they're just crazy. They've got schizophrenia, they're bipolar, they're factitious, whatever, pseudo-fantastica. They're having a delusion of grandeur, whatever, persecutory delusion. They're crazy. And that fits in to the stigma that is around the target. And it's an environmental stigma. It involves shame, a perceived ineptitude. They're dealing with the labels, antisocial, schizo, drugged out, angry, cursed, loser, slacker, dysfunctional, dealer, deviant, a person of interest, public enemy number one. You're the scapegoat, okay? And a lot of people will become involved just that way. So it's not like everybody knows. And targets they're led to believe that. All the attention that targets get in the beginning of the harassment, or in the intense, aggressive stages, right? That would lead them to believe what? That they're being watched all the time. Even their thoughts are being monitored, right? They know everything. They can see through your eyes. There's a supercomputer that knows what kind of ice cream you're going to get from the store and all this and that. Okay, I don't buy into that. I do believe the government's working on a lot of stuff, but I think there's other ways that this stuff works. And I've talked about that before. If you want to watch my other videos dealing with the spiritual explanation, demonic hive 1 and 2, multidimensional gang stalking, labyrinth, mechanism, control programming, go down the list. Because a lot of that stuff involves the spiritual dimension. And even when you're dealing with the elite, or witchcraft, or people who do readings, or they get into astrology or whatever. How do they know things that haven't happened yet? Well, the information comes from outside of space-time, whether you're dealing with synchronicities or prophecies or whatever. Okay, it's all the same. The hidden knowledge and secret wisdom of the secret societies that deceives the elite. Spiritual dimension uses that information to dazzle and bewitch their targets. Okay, they have a plan, and targeted individuals, they get the raw deal, man. Okay. There's a lot of people that deal with delusions and influences in their life that would lead them into a place where they form a false proposition due to stimuli. They have a problem and they think they found the solution because the atmosphere changes. And a lot of that is pragmatic stimuli, and I've talked about that before. Suddenly you might feel anxious or uneasy, or your emotions are going to be flipping from one thing to another. A lot of people say, well, that's just mental illness. You need pills, you need medication. Well, not necessarily. It's like when people become involved in a cult, okay, maybe with a seducing spirit or something like that. You wonder, how do these people get under the control of this cult leader? How do they end up believing these kooky doctrines, right? Like Mormonism, where they're wearing magic underwear and all this other ridiculous stuff. Like you're going to be a god one day and have your own planet. And what? I mean, how do people buy into this stuff? Or the cults that go out there and like that guy out in the desert, the Strong City cult, he just passed away a while ago. They thought he was God, right? He was a Seventh-day Adventist, right? And that's even kooky, because what do you got there? You got, you can't worship on Sunday because that's the mark of the beast. And it says very clearly in the Bible in Romans 14:5, Colossians 2:16, don't judge anybody according to a Sabbath day, right? Why? Because we're not under the law anymore. Okay, things like that are obvious. But how do people become bewitched? How do they become involved in believing this stuff? Well, it's the same thing. It's just the opposite. So like I said before, you have certain individuals who might start feeling uneasy, or all of a sudden you become panicky, or you become agitated, or whatever. It's like when you get woke up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep. Some of that stuff is demonic. A lot of guys will process that as things that are electronic. And yeah, I would say that that's very possible. And I've also mentioned before that these things come from the spiritual dimension. Anytime you're dealing with technology, whether you want to go into the Book of Enoch, or you want to go back into the Genesis 6 account, or after that, before the Tower of Babel, even in the Freemasons, if you're one of those guys that likes the secret societies, or you just fixated on the government, look at the origins of the government, look at all the kingdoms and so on and so forth, and who's working in the government now, and what are you going to do? You're going to go all the way back to that, and you're going to see that even technology and so on and so forth is a spiritual issue. Okay, but my point is that people can be seduced that way. They can become affected in that way, and they're going to assume things or form propositions in their mind based on that stimuli, right? Okay, and I've seen that a million times. A lot of people might call it psychosomatic or something like that, and so people will say they go to one of those cults or whatever, and leading up to that point, they might start feeling uneasy. Or they might be tormented during the week. And then, they'll get to that place and they'll just feel peaceful. They will feel maybe even ecstasy, or they'll feel tingles or whatever. You get into the Kundalini spirit and all those other things. But what do they believe at that point? Well, it's got to be right. It feels right, right? And then they feel so comforted. They feel like they're part of a family. Cults have that one thing in common, where people, they feel like a member of a family, right? And a lot of people that are involved in cults, or people that come out of cults, talk about that, or family members of individuals involved in cults will talk about that they cut off all their ties. It's like they're reprogrammed. Okay, targets will deal with that. But the point I'm getting at is, at that point, what happens? Well, they form a proposition, right? They form a proposition that would lead them into a place where they can be manipulated. And that process where they're bewitched is sealed up. Okay, that guy out of the Strong City cult or whatever, Wayne Bent or whatever his name was, what did he do before 9/11? Well, he wrote in a blog, the towers and the idols, the towers of Babel of America, and he was going to send them crashing into the ground. That was right before, literally right before, 24 hours before 9/11. Okay. Now, how is that possible? Now, remember, he told everybody that he was God, okay? He moved from being a Seventh-day Adventist to starting a cult where he was, doing all kinds of weird stuff. He eventually got charged with sexual assault of minors, and then I think he got cancer in prison, and they let him out. But the point is, how does something like that happen? Because it's demonic, okay? And then what happened to all those people that were experiencing those subtle forms of stimuli? Well, once they saw that, they were sold out that this guy was the Messiah. Not only had they been dealing with all those subtle forms of manipulation, you should have seen the gal that played piano for that cult. She looked like she was on heroin, okay? And I've seen that before, even with the Mormons and other people that, I worked with a gal that was a Mormon. She used to, oh, I'm just so happy. And she was, trying to figure out what kind of trees she was going to put on her planet eventually and all this stuff. And it's like they're on something. Okay, that's demonic, okay? And then, when this guy predicted that stuff, they were sold, okay? The proposition was sealed in their mind, and targets are dealing with that kind of stimuli. It's just different, right? It's more negative. Like I said, there are a lot of things that are happening to people out there in society. People are being deceived exponentially. But targets, well, they're thrown into that place, into the menagerie, like I said before, to obfuscate spiritual activity, government programs, and other things that are going on. They're also used as guinea pigs and as vessels of wrath for coercion. So my emphasis is that the reprogramming and manipulation that targets deal with are not necessarily the obvious stuff. Okay. You're dealing with direct-to-conversation, surveillance, workplace harassment, break-ins, food tampering. You're dealing with all that stuff. Okay. But the things that make up your environment a lot of times are invisible. There is so much manipulation involved in this world, involved in gangstalking. Targets are sensitized. Okay. They're conditioned. They're traumatized. They're reprogrammed. They're dealing with all these things. In fact, let's go through that sensitization thing again, because I know there's a lot of targets out there that don't understand this properly. Okay, they're reacting to things, they're becoming indoctrinated, and the last thing you want to do is become aggressive. And I've mentioned that when targets start confronting people, what are you trying to accomplish? They don't care. If they cared, they wouldn't be doing it. Okay, that's the first thing you got to remember. The second thing is you have to consider the source. If somebody's so messed up they're going to be doing that stuff, they basically don't have a conscience anyway, okay? And they want to harass you. And not only that, they want to provoke you, okay? And they don't care. They think it's funny. They're getting off on it. People have talked about going over to the other side, and I've mentioned this before. You wouldn't be able to do it. You have to have a particular type of psychology in order to get away with this stuff. Your conscience would not allow it. And I've mentioned that so many times that these people they've forfeited normal options to engage in this behavior. You have to remember that when you're being attacked as a target, these people could be doing anything, right? It's not normal, okay? That's the first thing that should pop up into your head. These people are totally abnormal and twisted, and it wasn't by accident. Yeah, some people are getting paid. There might be a government program thing going on, but there's more. There's demonic critiquing in their life, okay? Their mind has been warped. Their conscience has been seared. And, when targets become sensitized, it's easy to read into things, and it's easy to become emotional, be manipulated, and start reacting. And I've been tempted to do it. But let's go over that sensitization definition again for people, because, the fact that individuals who are experiencing gangstalking are accused all the time of being crazy, that involves the sensitization process. Of course, they're going to read into things, because they are sensitized to things in everyday life, and they're also thrown into the mechanism that's already out there, and I've talked about that. You are just starting to notice the things that are out there. Sensitization, a form of harassment involving subjective stimuli to create associations from actions, words, phrases, environmental stimuli for covert harassment, communication with the target, a type of trigger mechanism that can be used against the target in combination with trauma attack techniques for unconsensual invasion of the target's mind to infiltrate his or her psyche for conditioning, triggering, to form associations, to control their emotions, and create that type of reciprocity in the sense that all those associations are going to be connected to emotions and other things in their life, and it's going to be a downward spiral. It is a chain reaction. This stuff is pretty scientific, and it creates an extreme paranoia or hypervigilance in the target. Okay, a lot of people will call it hypervigilance rather than paranoia. You can call it whatever you want, but it can move in to irrational paranoia, right? Why? Because you don't know what's happening, and neither does most of the people around you, okay? The harassment methodology creates a perceived unwarranted paranoia by hijacking the physiological and psychological mechanisms of survival in the target. An asymmetrical warfare involving covert methodology that is designed to stimulate hypervigilance in the victim using random assaults, synchronized attacks, along with infiltration to maximize the environmental pressure and constant speculation of the target. And of course, like I said earlier, it involves sensitization, which incorporates the key element of plausible deniability. And not only is the target individual surrounded by this constant agitation in their environment, whether it's visible or obvious or whatever, a lot of times they'll be dealing with bait, or they will be encircled or infiltrated, maybe by a honeypot or by coworkers or people in their family maybe. There's a lot of ways that it can work, and it always involves, of course, the target being ganged up on, which brings into play the game dynamic, which they have to incorporate that because they want to involve your ego. They want to involve emotional manipulation. And at the end of the day, you're dealing with intense demoralization and deprivation. Okay, and that's really what we're looking at in the long run, because this stuff all chips away at your sanity. It all has an effect on your morale. It creates the labyrinth. And you look back down the corridors of time and they want you to believe the lie that you've missed out on all this stuff and these people are going to get away with it. Those things are lies. Okay, this world is a very small portion of your existence. And I've talked about that before. When you're waking up to the reality of the evil around you and the things that are really going on in this world, it gives the target an opportunity to snap out of it, to reach out to God and be saved out of this, because everybody else is going to end up under the wrath of God, period. Okay, that's just the reality of it. But targets are dealing with that type of demoralization. They're dealing with all kinds of attacks: covert drugging, covert poisoning, constant agitation, sensitized harassment, rumors, workplace harassment, sleep deprivation, isolation, demonic hounding, accusation, gaslighting, fear, paranoia, anxiety, frustration, deprivation, social deprivation, environmental chaos involving different threats and suggestions in the directed conversations that follow those different themes that just make them look crazy, whether it's the poisoning or we're going to give you cancer. And some of that stuff, who knows if they're going to do it or not. But the point is it is there to put that target into a place where they're flipping from one emotion to another, into a place of hopelessness, into that labyrinth of demoralization and deprivation. It's a tag team scenario. Never buy into that game dynamic. It is there to manipulate you. Okay, you're losing. What are you going to do? Well, you can't control other people. I've talked about that's a trap. That's a bait for targeted individuals. Okay, you have to simplify your life. There's no chivalry involved in this. That's another thing you got to remember. It's unfair. It's not a contest. With a contest, you could have the possibility of when you're being ganged up on. Okay, which brings up some other things. Is that you are not the aggressor. You have the high ground. Okay, they are breaking all the rules of the universe. Okay, they're not supposed to be doing this stuff. They are going to be judged. That's something you have to know. I've talked about that before. And they are trying to hijack your mind. They are trying to hijack your emotions, and you can't let them do it. You have to simplify your life. Avoid the complexity that they're throwing at you. Okay, you don't have to deal with all these dilemmas. You just have to focus on the things that you have control over. I've talked about that before. Focus on your diet. Learn some things. Study the Bible. Okay, try to work on your finances. Whatever. Just ignore this stuff. You don't want to let them derail you. Okay, you want to display a type of reaction or behavior that is completely oblivious to what is going on around you. Remember, you are denying them what they are after, and they want something. Oh, yes, they do. Your lack of emotional disposition and reaction to their attack methodology is going to deprive them, it's going to frustrate them, and they are going to lose. And they are doing it for nothing. Avoid the baiting, make it insignificant, consider the source, cancel all these things out. Remember the characters that you're dealing with. And also remember that if they have to become obvious, it kills the gaslighting and they could possibly get caught. Their attack methodology requires your participation. Do not participate. And never become your own attacker. They want that. They want to infiltrate your mind where you have the negative self-talk, where you start anticipating things, where you start reading into things. And if you do, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Never do their job. Never participate. And remember, it is your moral, spiritual obligation and responsibility to be aware of what is going on and to ask God for help, because you are way over your head in this. Okay, and you're going to need that. That's one of the biggest benefits of this. Okay, like I said, this requires your participation. Do not believe the lie. Don't react. Don't become emotional. Remember what they're after. Simplify your life. And be aware that not all the manipulation that you're experiencing is visible. Some of it is very subtle. Okay, it's like the cults. It's like that stuff I talked about. You don't even know it's there. Okay, when you get into CIA mind control, when they do this kind of thing to people, when they profile someone and involve themselves in someone's life, they manipulate them in ways that are unseen. Okay, whether you believe you're dealing with something spiritual or whether you're dealing with the government, you have to be aware of the motive. Well, guys, hopefully this has helped someone out. I'd like to thank everybody for watching this. I'd like to thank everybody who helps support me and the channel. The link is always in the description. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.